So I'm going to have to break with convention and utter the unmentionable word in American politics, the F word, fascism. Because a lot of what I'm seeing, including a lot of the rhetoric that I'm hearing from the Trump administration this second time around, is overtly fascist. Especially Marco Rubio in his Munich speech. We're going to get to that. For example, you hear Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, making these references to 19th century American foreign policy in Latin America. The good old days, when it's admitted by historians that the United States acted in ways that were imperial, because this was before the advent of democracies. So during the 20th century, we've had all these democracies spreading up. This coincided in Europe with the fall of the royalty, and the royalty being replaced with parliaments. So for Marco Rubio, he's really outstripping even neoconservatives. He's even outstripping the Project for the New American Century that he says has inspired him so much. And he's constantly using this phrase and this logo from the Project for the New American Century, but even he's gone to a level of extremism even beyond this. And so in his glorying for the good old days of the empire, and even speaking fondly of the Spanish Empire, the British Empire, if any of those kinds of governments that were established like in the 17th century by the Spanish and the 19th century by the British in India, or the United States in the 19th century in Latin America, if any of those kinds of governments were established throughout the world today, we would call it beyond fascism, because we're not living in the epoch of European royalty, and we're not living in the imperial age. And it was precisely the imperial rivalries which led to World War I and then led to World War II. So if any of those examples from Spanish, from British imperialism, or from American imperialism of the 19th century were tried today, we call it fascism. And they are being tried today, like in Iran and Ukraine. And the people that are on the end of those bayonets feel the fascism, even if maybe we don't in the United States. But the thing that I think Marco Rubio was trying to say in his bumbling, half-hearted way was that we can affirm culture. We can affirm the culture of the Spanish and the culture of the British. But he was going far beyond that, because the culture of the Spanish arrived in the New World at the end of a bayonet. See, culture isn't one culture dominating the other. It's all cultures in harmony, and you appreciate different cultures. That's what I take to be the point of structuralist anthropology. I'm trying to understand the other. So yeah, there's a lot that was imported to the United States, like the cowboy hat and the lasso, and cowboy boots maybe, that came from Spain. But what about the culture of the Indians? What about indigenous culture? At least in the United States, it was all but completely wiped out. Yeah, we can affirm that what was borrowed from England, and it does resonate with us as Americans. We share a lot of the same roots. But the way that he's affirming it, like it was this great thing that European powers went and established empires. Let's not forget that they were also erasing the local cultures, like Spanish Castilian culture was erasing some of those more local cultures that were in Spain. That's even happening today. this was Marco Rubio's Munich speech, the speech he gave before the Munich Security Conference, as if opposition, that's what he's saying, as if opposition to empire is some politically incorrect woke plot. And it's outstripping even the neoconservatism. Because although conservative commentators have come out of the closet with the word empire, especially starting in the 21st century, for most of the 20th century, the neoconservatives, they wanted to deny that America was an empire. They said that we're not like those empires of old that now Marco Rubio and others in the administration say we have to recover. We're not like those empires of old, and we're not really an empire. Yet the world has gone to freedom through economics, and we just enforce liberalization. I mean, that's how people like Bill Kristol and Irving Kristol and William Buckley, John Horowitz, that's how they sold American foreign policy. And yeah, sure, it was just a pretense, but now the cat's out of the bag. And so Marco Rubio's ahistorical outlook, a bogus historical outlook, if he thinks we should, as he was addressing Europeans, saying we need to go back to this imperial mindset that made the United States so great, the Western Hemisphere so great through the intervention of the Spanish, the British. We need to go back to that. That's really a call for fascism, because in a democratic age, you can't impose colonialist regimes. So they don't want to come out and say authoritarian governments or totalitarian governments or fascist governments, but that's really what they're telling you. Marco Rubio was lamenting. He said after World War II, all this imperial project just came to an end, but now we need to recover it. It's pretty amazing hearing this kind of rhetoric, and the kind of rhetoric that's coming from Pete Hegseth when he's talking about greater North America, and he's saying that actually Mexico all the way down to Ecuador, that's not the global south. That's still North America, so it's under our purview. And showing these maps in the White House of America withdrawn. Like, I understand from John Mearsheimer, he doesn't say a lot of stupid things. He is a very scholarly researcher, so for the most part, I can take his word for things. He said that there were conversations and attempts to bring a lot of the islands in the Bahamas and the Caribbean into the United States, at least to make them territories, like Guam and Puerto Rico, to make them territories, if not states. But at the time, during the 19th century, when this was being discovered, it was reasoned, well, the American people, they're against slavery, and there was still slavery on these islands, Jamaica, whatever, and so they said, no, let's not incorporate them into the United States, because then we won't be able to maintain slavery. And they were a cheap source of labor for American corporations. So, also in the actions of Trump and this brazen authoritarianism, it is a return in the rhetoric and the actions. It's a return to the naked imperialism of the 19th century. And Trump will be doing and is doing great damage to the institutions around the world that always relied, the institutions around the world that the United States always relied on to make its case. Like even during the Iraq War, at least there was a pretense, or a pretext of going through the United Nations. Now Trump is like, we don't even care about international law. And it's like an invitation to other authoritarian states to follow similar patterns. And while the allies may be too afraid and may seem like they're walking on tiptoes because they don't want to get on the other side of Trump's anger, I predict that over time you're going to see a weakening of the Allies. And part of that's good. Like, I think that the United States should withdraw from NATO and just let Europe figure it out. But we're entering a really scary time politically, domestically in the United States and politically in Europe, because as the world economy starts to feel the noose around its neck from the lack of oil and from the Strait of Hormuz permanently being closed, that's going to have an effect on the U.S. economy. We're almost down to the end of our strategic petroleum reserves. And when the poop hits the fan, things can happen that nobody can expect. And we're in for a rocky road, so buckle up. But that's just what I wanted to say. In glorifying empire, Marco Rubio was all over the place. In fact, this is traditionally not the path that American policymakers follow, since the whole thing about the Monroe Doctrine was that no other empire had a right to interfere in the Western Hemisphere. The British were kicked out in 1812. The Spanish were finally kicked out in 1898. So now for him to say, oh, actually, those empires, they were actually good, it's really a slap in the face of the view that American policymakers have usually had about history. I've never seen an American politician want to glorify the Spanish in this region. His argument was that Spanish were brutal, but the United States could do it better. The argument has always been we're not an empire. And in this merging of the militaries between Israel and the United States, and the merging of the intelligence apparatus and the industries, robotics, cyber warfare, missile defense, and the merging of all of these, and then blurring the line between offense and defense, and merging in a way that not even future presidents will be able to disentangle, because the law is written in a way that permanentizes and institutionalizes this merger with the Israeli military. In this new law, which probably will pass, part of the Defense Authorization Act, they're seeing that Israel is really the model. And for policymakers, especially neoconservatism, which is the mainstream now in Washington, you're really seeing that Israel is the model. Israel is how they would like the United States to be. Understanding militarism, complete and overt censorship, disregard for human rights, just throwing political enemies in jail without a trial, torturing them. A base of population which is so far to the right, there's not even voices for peace, mob rule. This is really the model. And so by signing this merger of the U.S. and Israel militaries, it's also a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, harken back to an earlier time of imperialism. Because Israel today more closely resembles how the British acted in India than it does any contemporary democracy. So in a lot of ways, this is really the model. And it's such a shame and it's such a departure from Trump's first term and everything that he stated that he wanted to do, which was bring transparency, liberalization, and common sense to Washington. But it also just shows you the power of the Israel lobby and the hold that the neocons have always had on him. This was always the plan.